Welcome to The Explainer. If you're in the world of learning and development, you know there's a huge difference between a training session that people just enjoy and one that actually changes things. Today, we are digging into the professional's workflow, the models that take a simple presentation and turn it into a program with real measurable impact. Let's dive right in. This quote right here, it just gets to the absolute heart of it. The goal is never just to give a nice speech. It's about creating actual change. And that right there is the difference between just presenting and being a true instructional design pro. It's focused, it's targeted, and it's all about achieving something specific. So, before we get into all the nuts and bolts, the different models and frameworks, we have to start with the right mindset. And that professional mindset always begins by asking one simple question. Why? Why are we even doing this training in the first place? And you know, as soon as you answer the why, it immediately leads you to the who, because the very first step in any great design is to deeply understand who you're designing for. You have to get their context, their needs, their motivations. And this brings us to a foundational theory that is surprisingly practical for any training environment. It's really interesting to look at Maslow's hierarchy not as some abstract psychological theory, but as a super practical checklist for us. Think about it. Are the basic physical needs met? Is the room comfortable? Can people actually see and hear? Then what about social needs? Have you created a positive, interactive climate where people feel like they belong? And esteem? Is there a certification? Does this training have value? And finally, does it help people reach that peak of self-actualization, helping them unlock their full potential? Okay, so you get your audience. You understand their needs from top to bottom. But then what? How do you actually build something that meets those needs? Well, this leads us to a really crucial distinction that every single instructional designer has to master. All right, let's get really clear on the two fundamental phases of creating any training program. You have the design phase and you have the delivery phase. Think of it as the blueprint versus the actual build. The best way to think about this is like building a house. An architect spends weeks or months creating a detailed blueprint. That's your instructional design. It's got the needs analysis, the learning objectives, the content, how you'll evaluate it, everything. Then a completely different team, the construction crew, comes in and actually builds the house. That's the delivery, the live training. One absolutely guides the other, but they are very, very distinct jobs. In this quote just nails a common reality in so many companies, right? In a lot of big organizations, you'll have a central team that designs a global program, and then they'll turn around and train local trainers on how to deliver it. This is exactly why that initial blueprint, the instructional design, has to be so incredibly solid. It needs to be clear enough for someone who wasn't in the room when it was created to pick it up and deliver it flawlessly. Okay, with your blueprint ready to go, you need super clear goals for what you expect learners to actually do with the information. This is where a tool like Bloom's Taxonomy is a lifesaver, especially when we zero in on two really important levels. Let's focus on two really powerful levels: apply and create. Applying is all about using a model you've just learned. For example, maybe a learner follows the guidelines we gave them to make a pretty good PowerPoint slide. They're basically just following the recipe. But creating, that's a whole other level. This is when that same learner goes beyond the rules to invent a completely new, innovative presentation template. You see the difference? They're not just following the recipe anymore. They're writing a brand new one. And that's the jump from competence to true mastery. So, you've designed it, you've delivered it, your learners can apply or maybe even create with what you've taught them. That's fantastic. But now comes the tough question. How do you prove to your stakeholders that it actually worked? How do you measure the real impact on the business? And this is where the legendary Kirkpatrick Model comes into play. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. It gives us a structured, four-level framework to evaluate how effective our training was. We're actually going to extend it to a fifth level, ROI, because it gives us a ladder that takes us all the way from someone's initial gut reaction to the hard bottom-line business results. Let's just walk through these 5 levels real quick. Level 1 is reaction. Pretty simple. Did they like it? Level 2 is learning. Did they actually get it? Level 3 is behavior. Are they using it back on the job? Level 4 is results. Did our training move the needle for the business? And finally, the big one, Level 5, ROI. Was it worth the money we spent? Now, let's start with Level 1, because it's the one everyone does, and it's also where the biggest, most common mistake is made. Pretty much every training program in the world collects some kind of reaction feedback. You know the ones. We call them happy sheets. But here's the hard truth. The vast majority of them provide almost zero actionable value. So here is the crucial problem. These forms ask if the lunch was good, if the chairs were comfy, if the session was engaging, but they totally miss the single most important question. The feedback is not collected against the learning objectives that you worked so hard to define. And what's the consequence? You know if people had a nice time, but you have absolutely no idea if the training was actually effective at achieving its goals.
But here's the good news. The fix for this is surprisingly simple. Use technology. Create a simple Google form, list out your learning objectives one by one, and just ask participants to rate how well each one was met. You can throw a QR code up on your final slide, and in less than 5 minutes, you get powerful, objective-driven data that can actually help you make the program better.
Now let's jump up to levels 3 and 4, because this is where we start hunting for real, concrete evidence of change. So for a technical skill like Excel, you want to look for new behaviors. Are people generating reports faster? Is their boss giving them positive feedback? That's level 3. And does that behavior lead to a business result, like improved team efficiency or hours saved? That's level 4. Same for a soft skill like presentations. Is a manager actually seeing them use the new techniques? That's behavior. And is it leading to better performance scores? That's a result. This is the stuff that proves your training is delivering real-world value. And finally, we get to level 5, ROI. Now, the big secret here is that it's not about finding some perfect, absolute scientific number. It's about consistency. What you do is create a simple in-house formula that links your training budget to a key business indicator. Maybe it's sales figures, maybe it's employee retention. The key is to use that exact same formula every single year. That's what allows you to track your progress and show a positive trend over time.
And this quote really is the key takeaway for all of this. You might not implement all 5 levels of evaluation perfectly right out of the gate. And you know what? That's totally okay. The goal isn't to be perfect overnight. The goal is just to make continuous progress, getting a little more professional, a little more data-driven with your evaluations year after year.
So I'll leave you with this question to really think about. Using these models we've talked about, from Maslow to Kirkpatrick, how are you going to transform your next training program? How will you make sure it's not just another pleasant event, but a truly targeted, professional, and measurable intervention that makes a real, lasting difference?